Hey everyone, this is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology, and today we are going to be taking a look at all of the major astrological transits for the month of July. I am really excited today to also introduce you guys to a couple of new co-hosts that will be joining me each month to help me break down the astrology. You guys know I've been saying this for a while. I really, like when it comes to horoscopes and monthly overviews, I so much prefer a conversation than just flying solo and trying to tell the story of like all of these beautiful intricate transits and this big story of a calendar month on my own. For whatever reason, I just find it much easier to talk to other human beings. So I don't know, it was like a month or two ago, we put out a spot for auditions and we had so many wonderful, talented people who applied and sent us in videos of them breaking down the monthly astrology. And we try in this to also pick some people who can be empowered from within the Nightlight community. So I have two co-hosts I'm going to introduce you to today. They'll be helping me break down the astrology of the month after I go through a couple of promotions, introduce you to them, and we'll be off to the races telling you about the astrology of July. So before we get into it, as always, don't forget to like and subscribe. Share your comments and reflections. We'd love to hear from you guys, especially if there's a transit that you're circling on your calendar and you're like, ooh, that one, and you have some additional thoughts. Maybe you have some angle on one of the transits that we haven't covered. It's really nice to hear from you guys all the time in all of the videos, but these monthly overviews, there's so many different approaches you can take. So if you've got a cool idea, please feel free to share it. You can find transcripts of any of these daily talks also on the website, nightlightastrology.com. Now I'm going to take you over there right now because we've got two things that I want to turn you on to for July. Here's the website. When you go to the events page, go to the speaker series tab and check out these free talks we have coming up on July 13th, 14th, and 21st. I'm really excited that T. Susan Chang is going to be here talking about the decans. She is a fantastic author and expert on the decans and their correlations with the tarot. And so I highly recommend that talk. Also, if you've never learned about Sedna before, one of our staff, Erica Beach, she's on staff, is going to be giving a talk on Sedna. And then Jeannie Frisha is going to be giving a talk on some of the major astrological signatures in the charts of artists, famous artists. So all really wonderful talks. They're all free. When you sign up, you get the webinar link. And if you can't attend live, you get the recording afterward. If you go to, the live talks page, you'll see that my webinar for July is on Uranus and Gemini, one of the major planetary ingresses of next year. We looked at Neptune and Aries a few months ago, so we've been taking some time out to look at some of the big transits that are coming up in the near future. If you missed the 12th house webinar, you could pick up a copy of that. There's all of the outer planets in love that I did earlier in the winter and spring. You can get those on the shop page as well. And then there will be 3 new webinar talks that will be posted coming up here pretty shortly, and that will be August, September, and October's talks, so you can stay tuned for those. So on that note, I'm really excited. There are so many big transits this month, and I'm really, really excited to have 2 lovely people and really talented astrologers here with me today to help break down the transits, Alexandra Blair and Whitney Kranz. Hey, guys.
Hello.
So good to have you guys here. I'm so excited to have people with me to talk about the monthly overview. I've been wanting to do this for so long. You're we had a whole staff of people who watched Alexandra and Whitney's audition videos, and we all just fell in love with them. We thought you guys were so talented, and we're just so thankful to have you guys here on the show.
Well, thanks, Adam. That's really nice. I'm really excited to be here too, and I can't wait to get into it. I love talking about astrology, and I agree. There's something really special when you get together to collaborate with someone and you get multiple viewpoints. And what a month for it.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. I was like, it was funny because Whitney is from Minnesota. And I was like, I watched her audition. There was like 4 of us on staff that were watching all the auditions. And I go, guys, I think I might be biased because she likes the Vikings. I was like, am I being... Exactly.
It's ironic you've invited a wolf into the coop because I am a Packers fan. I even own stock. I do.
Oh. Dun, dun, dun.
It was a good thing you didn't mention that.
The biases are showing.
That's right. Yeah, totally. Well, I mean, we'll have at some point, maybe we'll in a month, like when we get to Super Bowl season or something, we might have to
do an astrology breakdown.
Yeah, we might have to do that.
Oh, heck yeah.
So I am really, really excited to be breaking down the astrology with you guys. I thought we could take just a moment for each of you to just tell us a little bit about yourselves. How did you get into astrology? What do you love about it? What do you like about looking at the monthly overviews? Whatever comes to your mind. Maybe Alexandra, you could start us.
Sure. Well, I am actually a just profusely atoning, probably eternally atoning astrology skeptic, reformed. I grew up with a just very a skeptical background, let's say, but in 2017-ish, I was kind of forcibly introduced to astrology in a school setting, actually, which I think is the only way I would have received it for a grade.
Interesting.
And I went to art school. I'm a proud first generation college graduate, so any excuse to talk about that. But at Parsons, one of my teachers was like, we're having someone come in to talk about astrology, print out your chart. And I ended up taking a look and was just so blown away by all the different pieces of a chart that aren't just the sun sign. And so I kind of started digging around, and during the thing, when a lot of us got serious about astrology in 2020, I also got serious about learning astrology, ended up taking some courses about specifically Hellenistic astrology. And now I'm in some of the nightlight courses because Jupiter's in Gemini, all the courses, let's do them all.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of my background and where I come from. I love talking with clients. I've been doing that for about a year and a half. And for about 2.5 years, I've been recording for some friends who run the Spirit World Center. They're shamanic practitioners, and I've been doing spiritual opportunity periods and talking about energetic cycles and things over there. And that is kind of how I came into the monthly transit tracking. It's my favorite thing to do. I love doing it for clients. I love predictive astrology. So my favorite thing to do, you asked, it is just like looking from new moon to new moon. The monthly thing makes my Cap rising brain happy, but if you look moon to moon, the cycles are so clear, and it's just really humbling every time I look at it, where things make sense in a way that they probably wouldn't otherwise. So
yeah, for sure. That's interesting that you were a skeptic. I think at one point that came up when we were talking, but I had forgotten that. So yeah, I think that's always fascinating when someone begins their astrological journey not like hooked by the magic that they already somehow believe in, but rather like, I don't know about this. Like you don't hear that every day. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, I come from a very sort of like uncharitable, even like skeptical background.
You were a hater. No, I'm just kidding.
Yes, and I can't come from more of like a atheistic practitioner, witchcraft and spiritual practice background as well. And so it's just been a real realignment of the poles over the past few years into something completely different.
That's super cool. Love it. And if you guys want to follow Alexandra as you're getting to know her now and in the months to come, it's 9 Lives Astrology on Instagram, and her website is 9livesastrology.com. And I'll be circling back to talk a little bit more about how you can contact her for reading and stuff at the end of our episode today. But yeah, thank you. Whitney.
I mean, wow. I'm so honored to be here, part of the Nightlight crew. I could never have imagined this. And I have to say, Alexandra, that is so amazing that you came to astrology in a school setting, because I went to school in a very, very, very different environment. And being somebody who probably polar opposite, really grew up with this, like, I didn't know what it was called, but an intrinsic sort of pull to the stars as a piece of belonging. I had so much trouble in school with people calling astrology a pseudoscience and this and that. And come on, like, nobody's trying to pretend this is a science. This is pure divinatory. Like, we're talking to God, right? And that is one of the reasons that astrology fills me up so much and is such an incredible passion of mine. My journey, this is something that I've really always been interested in. And I would say for the last decade plus have studied, but more consumed rather than studied, right? And so I felt pulled in the last probably year and a half, 2 years, to really deepen my studies. And it was in my research that I stumbled upon Nightlight and Adam, your daily podcasts, and basically fell right into this growth through the Nightlight programs. I just completed year 1 this spring, and the completion of that program really made me realize that, wow, my passions are valid and this can be my life. And so here I am on this journey. I've started my own business. Thanks for plugging astroarcana.com. And, here we go.
Yeah, I love it. I love that, like, the whole idea behind this was not only to take some of the creative, like, there's always patches, I think, when you're a regular content creator where it's just like, I don't like doing this particular kind of content. If I'm honest, that's always the monthly overviews and horoscopes for me. But I do not feel that way when I'm doing it with other people. And I was like, okay, well, we can take care of that need, and we can hopefully build up talented people within the community. And so that's the intention behind it. And it's just been great to, pull some people from the Nightlight space, people who are learning, talented. You've got your business going, and hopefully this is an opportunity to get your work out there and your creativity out there to a really great audience. I think the Nightlight audience and the student community is just full of really great souls. So yeah, I hope that it's beneficial for everyone, and that mostly for today that we get some interesting astrology for July to you guys. So you can find Whitney at astroarcana.com or on Instagram, astro.arcana.astrology, and I'll plug those again at the end today. I want to start off because, are you guys ready to dive in?
Yeah,
let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. So I want to start off by just asking this kind of big picture question, which is like, what do you guys think of as the biggest themes and transits of July before we actually go blow by blow through the calendar dates in order? What are your big themes and transits? And whoever wants to go first, I don't care, whatever.
Go ahead, Whitney.
Oh, thank you. Okay. When I look at the astrology of July, it spells alchemy to me, like pure alchemy and self-actualization through this process of emotionally maturing. There's something about we have Mercury at the beginning of the month doing all of these things. We have Mercury at the end of the month entering Virgo. And I just picture the Magician card in the tarot really creating this magic. I think that's also echoed by all of these planets, Mercury, Venus, the Sun, all entering Leo. We have our Capricorn full moon, and then all of these Pluto oppositions that happen when those planets enter Leo feels really transformative to me. So I would say that's where this month is going for me. Yeah.
For sure. Those Pluto transits are I know we all highlighted them. That's going to be part of what we're going to talk about today. For sure. Any one transit that really stands out to you? If you had to circle just one this month, what is it for you?
Oh, heck yeah. The Venus opposing Pluto retrograde feels really, really strong to me. It is, Pluto is always a double-edged sword, right? And there is beautiful transformation in seismic shifts, where I think we can feel a little bit of duality with this transit. Like, it could be as big as finding the true meaning of love and creativity and letting it transform you entirely. So that's what I'm excited to talk most about today.
Yeah. And we're definitely I want to come back to when we get to Venus opposite Pluto, because I know you really delved into that one too. So we'll definitely come back to that. What do you think, Alexandra?
Yeah, I have to agree quickly on the alchemy of the month. And I flagged that too as sort of like messages of change, because things come in and they're pinging Pluto as they come into Leo. But also just generally, there's a lot of astrologers talking about the astrology of the coming years, 2025, 2026 and on, and the big changes happening. And this very much feels like place where we're still ironing out some messy little details. There's still some thoughts in our brain that are keeping us up. We need to write them down so we can go to sleep, or like some ghosts that need permission to pass on. They're still kind of haunting us. So that stood out to me. But I think for me, the biggest theme of the month is really a sense of like me and mine. And I think that works for the Cancer Capricorn axis. And then also as things come into Leo, because there's this supportive trine from Saturn, but then also Neptune. It feels like even as those planets enter Leo, they're still getting that trine energy there. And so it feels like there's some questioning, wading through, dissolving, letting go, but also uncertainty, just kind of like creating an inventory, like where am I, who are my people, what are my things, and where is like the border of my like domain.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, so like so much the theme of Cancer, right, is like
Yes.
where and what and who do I feel connected and safe with, and yeah, that makes it. Is there a transit that stands out to you this month?
Well, I'm very excited about this second Capricorn full moon that's happening in the 30th degree of Capricorn. I just think it looks spooky. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I'm sure that we'll dive deep in there, but that degree is just kind of interesting. And then Pluto's going to be retrograding back only to that degree later this year. That's one of those ghosts I think people are going to need to give permission to go on.
Yeah, that's a good point. You know, I hadn't thought about that. I hadn't thought about the fact that this full moon is landing on the degree that Pluto's like, it's like last business in Capricorn is going to take place at. That's a really good point. Yeah. Well, for me, I'm like, I think of this month as I think of it as the coming out party for Venus, because since the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, she has largely been going through invisibility and gradually getting into visibility again. And if you think, we think back, we had this Cazimi in June between Venus and the Sun, and Venus was the host of the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, and Venus is going to oppose Pluto, and then very shortly after, Mars and Uranus are going to conjoin in Venus's sign, and then a couple ticks after that, Venus appears as the evening star and almost immediately squares Uranus at the beginning of August. So I feel like the things that Venus desires that are behind the recent Jupiter-Uranus conjunction are just kapow. They're just being pushed forward this month, especially through that close sequence of Venus opposite Pluto and then Mars and Uranus in Taurus, because they kind of work together in a way. But the second full moon in Capricorn is interesting. We rarely get that. And so you could also say that the Cancer Capricorn axis is just like loud this month. It's just like really busy. I like also the idea of alchemy with so much hitting Pluto. Like I love that theme that Whitney brought up. Me and mine, where is my space? Who are my people? What do I feel comfortable with? Those are really good themes as well. Yeah, good stuff, I think. So are you guys ready to start going transit by transit?
Yes.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. I'm going to put the real-time clock up. And I'm sorry, our beautiful faces will get a little smaller. Okay, so here's July 1st. And now you guys get to deal with the epic pen. The epic pen has a real personality. You never know what's going to happen with the epic pen.
That's our fourth co-host on the show.
Exactly.
He has a personality.
Personality for sure. We can group some of these together, right? Like, I think it's really interesting that on July 2nd, we have two simultaneous trines happening. We've got Venus in Cancer trining Saturn, who's now retrograde, in Pisces. And at the same exact time, and actually, I'm going to back this up, just like I have fixed Aries on the ascendant, so I can kind of keep us with a steady house view here. But if you can see, this is also July 2nd. We've got Mercury in Cancer trining Neptune in Pisces, while Venus is also moving into the trine with Saturn in Pisces. So two very watery trines on the same day, opening up the month of July. I'll just switch right here so you can see. There's the Venus trine Saturn, Mercury trine Neptune, both happening on the same day. The first thing that comes to my mind, and then I really want to hear what you guys think about this too, is that these planets at the new moon in June were all in a square to Saturn, right? So we went through this whole lunar cycle that was sort of toned by the conflict, if you want to put it this way, between air and water, right? And I see that as a conflict that can express itself in many ways, but one of them would be like questions about the relationship between mind and emotion, or like emotional intelligence, if we want to kind of blend them together. It feels to me like this is a month starting off right away that there's this immediate potential for a healing, a soothing, and an integrating of mental and emotional energies. I see these as pretty constructive given the commonality of water. I normally don't love, contacts with Saturn, but they're trines and they're, it's very watery.
Yeah.
It feels like grandmotherly, nurturing, wise, kind of elder maturing that's happening on the level of mind and emotion. That's the first thing that comes to my mind. What do you guys think?
I definitely agree. I think it's really interesting as things are entering, they hit that trine with Saturn first and then with Neptune. And I got that same feeling of the grandmotherly energy, but also the hope and optimism of a new generation in a way. So it's like Saturn's going to toss up those boundaries and give you that kind reminder, because the trine is a really supportive aspect in that way. But then Neptune brings dissolution of things that don't serve us in that way, and also a sort of optimism to those planets too. So I felt the same thing there.
I absolutely agree with both of you. And I think that these trines really represent a kind of closing of that cycle, at that watery cycle, as we move into some of these more Leo and Aquarius dynamics, excuse me. And so Mercury here feels like, yes, we're trining Neptune, but could this be more insights and intuition, right? And that grandmotherly energy you're talking about, I see that here with Venus and Saturn and her loving boundaries and helping us hone our creativity, right? So that's what this early group in July is speaking to me.
Yeah, I feel like one thing that's really interesting is the transition that happens, right? If we tick this forward just a little bit, the very next thing that happens is Mercury goes into Leo and instantly is now on July 3rd opposing Pluto. And I
that's
feel
so
like,
interesting, Adam, too, because it's still actually in a degree-based trine with that Neptune energy. So I'm so curious as to how that kind of will translate for people. Sorry to interrupt you.
no, you're fine. Interrupt anytime. I feel like it's like it's interesting that you have like the idea, the image in ancient astrology of separating within 3 degrees is like the fruit falling off of the tree.
Mm-hmm.
If you think the fruit's falling off the Mercury Neptune tree, and as it's in midair, it's like, let's oppose Pluto, like right
Yeah.
while we're doing it, So it's like, wow, what could that mean? And the image that comes to my mind is, where does, almost like when I think about Cancer to Leo, sometimes I think about the image of my little kids. There's spaces where they just need to be cuddled and held and like squeezed and loved. And then what happens is like their little heart meters get filled. And then all of a sudden they jump off my lap and explode with creative energy. And they're completely independent. They don't need me. They don't need mom. They need to, express themselves and be confident and independent. And then, they'll come back, and that's kind of the pattern, right? But it almost feels to me like, there's this kind of like emotional, nurturing little nexus of energy between Mercury and Neptune, followed by some very big and bright explosion that maybe is coming from having felt, seen, or heard, or having done some. It's funny how once we heal, we sometimes feel like we're empowered to say something or do something or announce something. And it feels like Mercury opposite Pluto is kind of like, I feel like I drank from the well, and now I have something to say, or now there's something of consequence, of great consequence, that's going to happen because of this healing contact that was made between Mercury and Neptune. Or maybe you get filled with some grandiose illusion and then you go do something completely nutty. You kind of see it go, like, so, but you get the idea that it's like the two are intimately connected.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting that only because this is Pluto's first few dips into Aquarius, only pretty much Mars and Venus have endured this opposition so far. So like last year, May 20 through 26, Mars was doing this opposition, and then Venus did that opposition from June 5th to June 11th. And then, of course, there was like a retrograde. Of course, the moon has also, but you might be able to look back at those periods and see what was going on in your life and kind of see what was playing out. For me, the Leo Aquarius axis with Pluto there, I think is going to be a journey. And at this point, almost 2 decades long journey for people to be questioning how the things that they're passionate about and the things that they put their vitality towards and the places they donate their radiant energy to, how that serves or interacts with the collective and with sort of social groups or concerns that they may have, and the things that we may not necessarily want to be a part of, but that maybe we're being called to for some reason, if that makes sense.
Love that. Whitney,
I was just going to comment on Pluto here, because if we think about Pluto in Aquarius, Pluto really has that ideal image of humanity in mind, right? And Pluto is ready to tear it all down to build it back up. And so I think that these early transits with Mercury opposing Pluto, I mean, on one hand, yes, it could be sort of these this insight, deeply insightful, but what about like the shadow qualities to maybe a little obsessive or anxious, right? And it is our journey to sort these things out so that we can go through that process of, alchemization or self-actualization.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like if you look at Mercury Pluto oppositions just in a vacuum, you often get moments of empowered speech or empowering thoughts or ideas or communication that somehow come surging out like volcanic, like an eruptive force that can be both destructive and creative simultaneously when you finally just accidentally say something you've been holding in for a year or something, But then if you think about it, it's also, Mercury coming off a trine to Neptune, which I was kind of joking around, like you could suddenly think that you're Jesus Christ and then think that you need to go and announce it to the world and, be faced with the consequences of suddenly looking like a mad person. I mean, that's like, obviously that's a crazy example, but the idea is just that Mercury is being filled with imaginative, emotional conviction, and then immediately hitting the opposition to Pluto. You could see it being like, maybe it's a little much, maybe you're out of touch with reality, or maybe you have something really important to say, and it's coming from your heart and from a place of rich, emotional, imaginative depth, but you may face some pushback. You may face some opposition somehow in sharing yourself, which is vulnerable for Mercury and Leo because it's a very heart-centered place. I want to communicate something from my heart, and Pluto and Aquarius might be some kind of collective or social backlash saying, I'd prefer you just go along with the crowd or be conform in some way. Or maybe it's the power of trying to be yourself while not conforming in some particular way. But those are the tensions that come to my mind anyway.
Right. And this transit says to me, word vomit.
Yeah.
Like too much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially since we've got on that day, if you even look at it, we've got Jupiter and the moon together in Gemini, right? With Mercury as the ruler. So that'd be a fair way of looking at that day in particular.
Yeah, I'm seeing a little bit of a sense of reckoning, but it feels a little bit of a slow build throughout the month as things slide into Leo. One by one, all these interpersonal planets, and it's going to kind of be affecting everyone intimately, but differently, very differently.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to our next transit, which is on July 5th, we have our new moon in Cancer. This new moon in Cancer, let me just bring it along here that we can see it. This new moon in Cancer is again going to be followed by a second full moon in Capricorn. So I think it would be fair to say that this next moon cycle really activates some of the major tensions between Cancer and Capricorn. But what do you guys think just about here? Here we are now looking at a very Cancerian lunar cycle to come. What kinds of themes comes to mind for you guys?
Yeah, this one to me is the first taste of that me and mine. And Cancer thinks about mine, and so does Capricorn, but they're thinking about different things when they hear the word mine. And so some of that tension will for sure be in play here. But this lunation for me really looks like it may activate the Cancerian impulse to kind of avoid self-examining. This is one of those difficult traits I find with me and my entire family with Cancer placements, is that not always ready to just hear candidly about myself or look sort of directly in the mirror. There's this great lyric that I was reminded of looking at all this Cancer Capricorn, and it's from the inimitable T.A. Swift, songwriter, who has several planets in Capricorn and a moon in Cancer. And the lyric is, "I'll stare directly at the sun, but never in the mirror." And that's really how I felt about this new moon paired with that full moon later this month. This might be a really friendly time to do that on purpose if you're listening to this and you're into that. But I think we're really being asked to candidly look at ourselves. Venus is going to be softening that ability. And that's why I think it might be a nice time to partake in that. It could be softening some of those rough edges. But the lunation has pretty much a sextile from Mars down there in a tough place, but in the superior position. And we've got that energy from Saturn and Neptune coming in sign-based and degree-based ways. So those are some things I was thinking about.
Yeah, for sure.
I love that. Taylor Swift on repeat in this moon cycle, huh? I'm on board. I think for me, this moon cycle, the new moon in Cancer specifically, feels like questions of nurture. What does nurturing really mean to me? What does nurturing really feel like to me? And how do we give that to others? How do we mother ourselves while still growing, finding the comfort of home while spreading our wings? And so I think there's a deeply emotional aspect to this particular new moon on the 5th.
That's such a good point, because I think that both Cancer and Capricorn have a nurture. However, the word nurture really only applies to Cancer. But I think for Capricorn, we could think about it as like fostering. It's not particularly, kind or effusive or always even very pleasant. But the Saturnian grandmotherly energy that we talked about does actually foster growth and push for creation and even creativity in its own way.
Right. We need to nurture ourselves and able to grow up that mountain that Capricorn climbs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the two go together so nicely. If you, as someone who's like an official Sun, Cancer, Moon, Capricorn, if I may say so myself.
You are?
I feel like the interesting piece about them is that they really do represent different, equally valid and viable paths in life that both have great spiritual potential. If you think about Cancer, and I mentioned this like a week or two ago in the podcast, Cancer called the gateway of mankind. On the ascendant of the Thema Mundi, the sun starts descending from the summer solstice, and the arc of the sun starts coming down. So we have the return of darkness from within the light. And that was, for ancient astrologers, that was about the descent of spirit into matter, becoming a material universe, which in a way doesn't ever for ancient mystics it doesn't really even have an origin. It's just it's like an image that is a way of explaining the material in relation to the spiritual. And it's like, okay, so the word becomes flesh, and that's sort of Cancerian and very lunar. But that pathway, if you think about it as a spiritual path, is the path downward. It's like into the body, into the world, into entanglements, into attachments, into vulnerability and fragility and mortality, and like go into it. And it's a really gnarly place. And the whole thing is like, can you end up feeling safe and comfortable and like it's inhabitable, you know? And like, and for that, there's a mothering energy and a nurturing and a devotional and a kind of romantic. It's very sensitive. And then on the other hand, you've got Capricorn, the gateway of the gods, that was associated with the rising of the light from within the darkness. And of course, goats were and are great escape artists. And so the Capricorn really represents the upward path. Now, in a mundane sense, that might be building skyscrapers, amassing wealth and power. But the only reason you would be able to rise up along some imagined hierarchy or transcend your attachments or your entanglements in the world is because you have to kind of turn a cold shoulder toward them. And you have to say, well, I can't get entangled if I'm going to build an empire. Or I can't, you know, like I can't get entangled if I'm going to go out to a hermitage and meditate and climb a great mountain and transcend the world. I kind of have to like turn some kind of cold, distant gaze toward the world in order to ascend in some way. And in my experience, when the two are paired together, as I was born with, one of the things that keeps coming up over and over is that you have to walk both paths at the same time. So how do you like allow yourself to be a human, to have a body, to have entanglements, enmeshments, emotional fragility? And then how do you identify or discern what parts of you need to grow up and you need to take up the mountain so that you get some higher perspective and maybe some healthy level of detachment from the entanglements that aren't healthy. And like carrying that at the same time is, I think, really difficult. And they're both sort of like, so you get like, that's kind of where we get the Capricorn sense of like an old wise grandparent. They've lived a lot of life and they can kind of see the difference between, you know, like it's funny how my grandparents, well, my kids' grandparents, so my parents will have far less tolerance for certain things that my kids do and far more grace and forgiveness for certain things that my kids do there. And it's very different than where my boundaries are. And I can only attribute that to them sort of having a perspective that's like 30 years ahead of me. You know what I mean? So anyway, those are just some thoughts that come to my mind about this new moon and kind of some of the tensions that we might be feeling around our like trying to foster certain things emotionally, and also feeling the tension of where we might need to grow up and do some difficult maturing or something.
I definitely like resonate with what you just said. Resonates with me. I have Capricorn rising and a Cancer moon, and my Saturn is in Aquarius. So I think that the next level of what you're talking about even is, if we're just thinking about Thema Mundi and the solstices, you know, Capricorn season is the time where you find out if your harvest is going to last you through the long, cold winter, and you're going to be able to feed your family. And that's a very different way of providing, but it's what Cancer wants to do as well. And then we get to Aquarius season where we say, okay, I know I can feed my family. Can I help my neighbors who need help? And so we are going to have that energy where the Pluto opposition is hitting us as we shift in. So I think it kind of,
that's perfect. And that actually leads really nicely into, and if I don't keep us going, we're going to be here for hours. So I will keep us going. We are going to look at this, because what happens is this new moon is also, as you guys mentioned, is configured to Saturn. Saturn also the ruler of the last full moon and the upcoming full moon in Capricorn. So we kind of ask ourselves like, well, what kind of Saturnian requirements are we looking at here? And I think to dovetail with what Alexandra was just saying, we look at here we have on July 10th, the sun will be trining. There it is. It did it.
The
big arrow just said, okay, it's gonna.
All right.
This happens. I get really excited, and then it's like big arrow. And I'm like, I didn't tell you to do that. Okay. All right. So there's the trine, and here's the simultaneous trine. So we have these two little periods where there's back-to-back trines between Saturn and Neptune. And I just keep thinking, the difference between Cancer and Pisces, if I had to put it simply in terms of where you look for emotional health or well-being, Cancer, as Alexander was saying, is me. You know, it's like, it's very personal. Pisces is very collective.
Yeah.
It's like, what is the emotional needs of humanity, or what are the emotional needs of my community, or there's it's like, it's so much more collective and sort of universal. And I can't help but wonder if some of these concerns across the Capricorn Cancer axis, the me and mine, are being asked to grow bigger in their awareness of other people as well. And almost like, yes, your emotional needs are valid, and make sure you also consider the needs of other people, collectives, bigger storylines that are going on. That kind of comes to my mind with these trines.
Yes, and I think we're seeing here too, this is the part in the journey where we're realizing that incredibly hard work is worth the reward, right? That's that Sun Saturn dynamic for me. And it's when I look at this, it's screaming. Like, work hard and you'll get there.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it does have that feeling to it. But to me, with one of the things that Saturn and Neptune point to whenever they're together is some form of sacrifice. I think there are questions, there are some real shadows to that as well, right? Like martyrdom or a martyr complex, you know, things where it gets like real serious at times, and you kind of have to wonder, is it too much? Am I sacrificing too much, or something like that? But I think it's interesting to look at these two trines happening at this time in terms of what are the greater emotional realities that I'm being asked to connect with, or to foster or nurture, or in some way, or devote myself to.
Can I tell you an image that just blasted into my mind last night as I was preparing this Venus trine Neptune? I don't know if y'all studied art history, but do you recall the famous Renaissance painting, The Birth of Venus? This
Yeah.
feels so Venus Neptune to me, that Botticelli painting, right? Like, here is this beautiful, dreamy, oh, look, we have the image to go with,
And the
right?
trines, the supportive trines.
Right.
Okay. Yes. So look at her. She is just primed and beautiful and a little mysterious. Like, what is
Mm.
the meaning of love? Is it bliss? Like, it's just, this came to me so loudly. And, you know, this is the trine that immediately precedes the Sun opposing Pluto as it crosses the sign boundary into Leo. And there's something here that's like, so here she is all primed and ready. And like, look at that woman trying to give her a robe, like, cover yourself up, Venus. And she is like, oh, hell no, I am stepping forth. It's like the mermaid steps out of the water and shakes out her mane. And here she goes, right? Like, you know, it was funny because earlier too, Adam, you were mentioning something about Venus, like the coming out of Venus, right? And I thought, well, geez, it's too bad this all isn't taking place during Pride Month. This feels like a very loud and proud transit to me, right? Like, Venus is loud and proud and reminding us that Pride is 365, and here she goes. She doesn't need that robe. She's just gonna do her thing, right?
Nice. Yeah. And well, on this note, Whitney, take us into Venus opposite Pluto, because that's what comes next on the 12th. And that was where you spent a lot of your time delving into.
Yeah, this Venus opposing Pluto transit really, really spoke to me, because what happens to Venus when she moves into Leo. Like, her lighting isn't quite right here, right? She's not in dignity. So her moon, or yes, in dignity. And so her mood lighting might not be quite the way she likes it to, but I don't think that completely affects her ability to bring about her significations, right? And while we can think of Pluto so destructively, like, I like to think of Pluto as the earth, like these profound shifts in the earth and the tectonic plates just moving. So what happens when we put those two themes together? I mean, you both know, but our audience doesn't know. I love to think in imagery, and it really works for me to bring sort of modern significations to these planets. And so, you know what I was thinking about? This Venus Pluto feels like the powerhouse female artists in our music world right now. I think Venus Pluto is like Lady Gaga, right? Like, Lady Gaga is this image reinvention. She's pushing the envelope. She sings about bad romance. And did you know that her fans, I'm sure there are some of them out here, she calls them the little monsters, right? And so there is, isn't that interesting?
So good.
There's definitely, right, like a subterranean aspect to Pluto where we are delving deep, right? Even think about Kesha kind of brings this up for me too. Kesha has this like air of inhibition, right? It's this like, I think of Dionysus and the uninhabited qualities. I think of Beyonce and her song Drunk in Love,
Yep.
I think of going to a rave and getting lost in the music and the dancing and the darkness. So these are some images that come up for me. But from like as you like to say, Adam, in a vacuum, I think, like, moving from light to dark, we're talking here about erupting passions and reclamation of inner creative power. Like, what is the power of love? I mean, and is there a Beauty and the Beast aspect here too? Like, love transcending darkness.
Right.
And those are some of the more positive, the positive significations. I think we can, there can absolutely be a shadow side too, of some possession and obsession and jealousy. And there's some primal attraction here. There's definitely a sexual element to this particular transit too. Like, it feels like healing sexuality or like sex magic almost. So those are, I don't want to take up I could literally speak for 20 minutes on this, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts and how those resonate with you all.
No, I mean, that was so good. I love those images. And I was just funny because Ashley and I are going to be with our kids and some friends at an herbal conference in Colorado that Ashley's teaching at. And I was looking at the fact that this was happening, and I was telling Ashley, I was like, okay, like me, like itinerary mode includes the astrology that we want to make sure that we're aware of, blah, blah, blah. And I go, so, I was like, I just want to be aware of it so that we don't get in any kind of fight or anything like that. And she reminded me that we're going to the last night of this event. There's a masquerade ball.
Wow.
And I'm going to be wearing, I'm literally wearing a beast mask with the horns and everything. And
Stop it.
No, and then she was like, "You're going to be wearing that beast mask." And then she was like, she was flirting with me and trying to make me feel better. She goes, maybe I want to make out with you. Maybe that'll be what the transit's
Well,
about.
this is
All
on
right, let's go.
this is on the heels of Venus Neptune, and I know that creates a
Ooh.
really good date day for you
I know.
guys. So
Historically, Venus, Neptune, I swear to God, the trines between Venus and Neptune we always end up going to see a cool movie. We go to a spa, we'll go get like a couples massage. I feel like those are my hands down. Like I'm always like, ooh, that's a good date night. But the other funny thing that, just to mention one more thing that I thought was really interesting, was that as this is perfecting, Ashley and I are also this evening, Friday, right before the masquerade ball, we are teaching a class on planets and plants together.
Oh,
And
perfect.
I was like, oh, that's really interesting. Like we'll be joining our superpowers to teach. I just feel like anything where there is the potential for a relationship to go through a moment of transformation, empowerment, change. We don't think about that typically outside of like crisis, you know, but the changes in relationships could be very creative, and the possibilities that sort of erupt through putting your brains together or collaborating with someone you love, or even a friend, or like I even think of Venus often as representing like women getting together and doing things too. So anyway, those were just popcorn thoughts that were flying up as you were talking. I loved those images.
well, I'm excited to hear about this masquerade ball.
I'm gonna here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna try to get a picture while we're there, and then I'm gonna post it on my Instagram, and maybe I'll post it on YouTube too. I'll get a YouTube short of me looking all crazy.
Beastly.
Yeah,
I
I
think
love it.
what really stood out for me about Venus entering Leo here is that this is the first time she'll be back here since retrograde last year. And now there is this aspect with Pluto. And so for me, it's kind of an opportunity I'm seeing or feeling to acknowledge what has changed during that cycle in the Leo part of your chart.
Oh my God. Okay, now another story. So last year we went to the exact same conference in Colorado, right?
Mhm.
But last year during the Venus retrograde. Okay, so and my natal Venus is in Leo, right? So it hit me really hard personally because the conference was at like, I want to say 10,000 feet. It was really high up in the mountains, and I got altitude sickness, and they had to carry me down like nearly unconscious off the mountain. And that happened while Venus was just stationing and turning retrograde.
Whoa.
And that's my natal Venus. You remember when we were talking and you said, God, you had some hard retrogrades.
Some
last
hard
year.
they came for
That
you
was that one.
personally.
So the funny thing is we'll be at the same conference, but it's down at like closer to sea level. It's like down a lot further. So
they made some changes too.
yeah.
Wow,
Anyway,
that's so
isn't that
interesting.
gnarly? Yeah,
That's
crazy.
super interesting. That's totally what I was thinking of because I have a stellium, including my Venus and Leo as well. And I learned some things during that time. And I'm like, okay, well, now it's my chance to prove to myself that I really
Yeah.
did learn those things.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Well, I see this as so in Whitney, did you have anything more you wanted to, you were really dancing there. That was great. You were
Oh,
busting them.
I could keep going, but we got a show to do, guys. Like
The Virgo moon won't allow it.
that'll have to be the excerpt. You'll find it on social media.
Yeah. Yeah. When you follow Whitney on social media, you can learn more about all of her takes, and they're all very, very brilliant. So Mars will conjoin Uranus on July 15th. And I see this as intimately connected to the Venus-Pluto opposition because Venus is the host of these two planets. So whatever she's doing with Pluto, like whatever alchemy and magic happen with Venus opposite Pluto, which I do think of could be, there's a destructive element. There's also a very creative and sort of energizing moment for Venus, but it is fueling the Uranus-Mars conjunction in Venus's sign, which is just a few degrees off from the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. And I feel like, so whatever this is why I said earlier, I feel like Venus is pressing the gas pedal because by the end of the month, she's emerging as the evening star.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, like this is, to me, this month, there's one of the biggest players is probably Venus and how she's changing, what she's thinking, what she wants, what she doesn't want, how she's growing, what she's learning, all of these things, which to me, we can think about that as relationships. I mean, that's like 1A in the textbook, but love, sex, style, appearance, art, creativity, women, friends, values, all different Venusian things are just really going through tremendous change. And the Mars-Uranus moment could be a little forceful. I think of it like, what we may need to advocate for something Venusian, or we may need to, be really assertive on behalf of Venus. And we could also be finding that we're being overly aggressive, assertive, or domineering, and that's clashing a little bit with like the values and sort of harmonizing nature of Venus.
Or like we're playing fast and loose, right?
Mm.
Because
what was the image? What did you come up with, Mars? Yeah.
Oh yeah. Watch this. So to clue in the audience, part of the audition process included a delineation of the Mars-Uranus transit. And because I think in images, this profound image of, oh my gosh, Jack Sparrow, the swashbuckling lead character of Pirates of the Caribbean, came to mind for me. And so that's really how I'm defining and picturing this Mars-Uranus energy, right? Just like out there, ready to go. And so I want to know what happens when Jack Sparrow and Lady Gaga get together, guys.
Wow, that's chaotic.
That's
Sounds like some sparks.
I mean, that day is so powerful when you look at it from the standpoint of what the moon is doing. It's a waxing gibbous moon, so it's growing in power. It's in its fall in Scorpio. It's opposing the Mars-Uranus conjunction. To me, this feels like the Venus-Pluto on its own. I can always see it going in different directions. But when it's coming so close to a day like this, it makes me feel like, oh, there's a lot at stake. And there's emotions invested in this. And we always think like, well, cooler heads will prevail, like let's be reasonable. Let's be careful and thoughtful, even when we have to push forward or create a little revolutionary activity. But I wonder how easy it's going to be, honestly, on this day. I feel like this is at the beginning of the year, I always write down like what look like the most difficult transits of the year. I had this written down as probably one of the most. Not that really constructive, beautiful, healing things can't come out of it, but like handling it or managing it without becoming impulsive or reckless or sort of losing our heads emotionally. Like, I feel like this is a tough day.
To me, with Venus coming off that trine from Neptune into Leo, it looks like I can do this. I can do this. I said I would do the thing. I've been hired to do the thing. And maybe that square kind of sign-based aspect from Mars-Uranus is a lack of, or perhaps a surprising realization that one does indeed have the material resources necessary to accomplish their goal. Like, for some reason, the thing I keep thinking of is this started out as being positive, but now we're going to go somewhere else. But like, I was thinking of Theranos, the health company, like, hey, we can make this amazing technology. It's going to help all these people. It's going to help health. It's such a dreaming big technology. And then there's that shocking moment where we realize that just absolutely, in terms of material science, is not a possible thing that could be happening. And there's this collapse of that kind of company and that narrative where things get swept away from under us, like this reality check. So for me, that those two planets in that superior position in that square, it is just sign-based at this point, but still it feels almost like a reality check from the ground, from Taurus.
Yeah. Yeah. Whatever the aspirations are, whatever is attractive to us, that's driving our actions, it's going through some kind of gut check. It's like, oh, I want this because I think it's beautiful or worthwhile or valuable, or I'm attracted to this, or wouldn't it be lovely if that, right? All of that's fine. But then we hit this moment where it feels like, do you really want that? Do you see what's going to happen if you go for that? Or do you know who you might hurt or bulldoze in the process? Or have you considered what other people want or the social consequences of this or that? And there's a lot to consider.
Yeah, the astrology was definitely different, but I want to mention one of the occasions I found when I was kind of doing my research, which was during that Mars Uranus in Taurus on January 20th, 2021. Now, a lot was going on in January 2021, but we're going to not get into any of that. And I'm just going to talk about the Texas freeze, which happened just a couple weeks after this transit, and basically it just feels so on the nose. It's like this sudden and exciting and agitating, goading, explosive thing that literally happened in the power systems in Texas, where the entire state's material security was basically threatened. If you don't know about it, you can definitely Google it. But basically, there was an unusual storm in Texas that brought really, really cold weather. The power grid failed, and a lot of people suffered, and some really tragically passed away because of exposure and lack of material security. There was all kinds of shortages of everything. So I think that's like a very on the nose manifestation of this. But when you talk about the social element of it, because it is being hosted by Venus, we can see this moment where people started to question, hey, why did this happen? How can we prevent this from happening again? Why is our power grid separate from the national power grid? Different questions that were going on that had this social norms and these collective ideas that I think are even going to be more pronounced now that we have Pluto in Aquarius as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. Anything you want to add, Whitney, before we keep moving?
Well, I feel like Alexandra has really set us up, and I want to hear how then we go into the Capricorn full moon. The
Yeah,
second
right.
Capricorn full moon.
Right. It's interesting because you get well,
Yeah.
one thing I just want to dovetail off from what Alexander was saying really quick before I go there. Yeah, like that the Texas power grid, it was because of ice, right? It was like this
It was cold.
yeah.
It was the
So
element of cold, essentially.
yeah. And
The ice
I
specifically.
and I just feel like one of the things that happens with Mars Uranus in any sign, but especially in a sign like Taurus, is that there's a pocket of there's a little pocket of time that becomes very unstable, and that instability can be the same kind of instability that you feel when you're in a very productive creative space, but it's unstable because it's just everything's just like sparky, and that can be almost like a fugue state that an artist is entering
Mhm,
into. It's like a
mhm.
live wire, and I feel like a lot of people may experience that as very invigorating and
Yes.
very like enlivening. But also when it comes to a sign that is all about support, security, stability, that can hit a little different, like a power grid that can't support, this like whole system
Mhm.
of stability that's being undermined. So it's definitely um I think this is probably one of the more difficult transits of the year in that respect, that it has a feeling of being like Mars isn't super comfortable in Taurus, and Taurus
Yes.
isn't super comfortable with Uranus. And so for that reason, that's such a good, like, vivid example of what can happen.
Yeah, and I think Uranus has a quality sometimes of bringing the power of the gods to the people, and that is very much just a string of words that can go both ways, can go in any
Yeah.
way. So, I think in some ways, when we think about Taurus as being the ground, the earth, and if we think about this transit as a bolt of lightning, what we do with bolts of lightning is that we direct them into the ground to ground them.
Yeah.
So in some ways, we may benefit from Mars not being super comfortable in Taurus and from not having the full explosive power of, I mean, go back and look at the timing of these transits happening in Aries, for
Yeah,
example,
right, exactly, yeah.
or freak yourself out about them happening in Gemini if you want to.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm with you on that.
Yeah. Well, then we move to another full moon in Capricorn on the 21st of did I get that wrong? July 21st. Oh,
No,
no,
that's
because at the
that's right.
29th degree. I just got to go back by some hours. Yeah, here we go. So, what's so interesting to me about this full moon is that immediately after it's full, it conjoins Pluto. And
Mhm.
immediately after it's full,
Oh,
the sun opposes Pluto.
yeah.
So, I mean, you've got just by the 23rd, the sun will oppose Pluto. Like, it's imminent. So,
Yes. They're in
yeah,
out of sign, like by degree, they are applying to to those placements. It's just a pretty interesting lunation, I think.
On the 21st, the day of the full moon, we also at the exact same time have, oops, here we go. Exact same time, we also have Mercury in a degree-based square with Uranus. It's like,
Yep.
it's
But
full
wait,
on.
there's more.
There actually is more, right? Because like the sun is trining Neptune, Mars is trining Pluto, Venus is sextiling Jupiter, which is, we talked about that as being sometimes cute, but amidst all this, who knows?
Let's put it all in for context here. So we've got, whoops. So
this is a busy day.
No, it is. I mean, like the month of July is just loaded. I mean, here we have Sun trine Neptune, Mars trine Pluto, Mercury square Uranus, and a full moon at the anaretic degree of Capricorn, moving into a conjunction with Pluto. And a day and a half later, not even, the sun opposes Pluto.
Yeah.
Just like take your pick.
And
I feel like
Saturn's retrograde, so let's throw that in the mix.
We can be like, what's the simplest way to describe this? Shit's gonna get real. That's it.
I think of it totally in the way that Whitney described. Like, this is the crucible. We put a bunch of stuff in the crucible. We're applying some heat. Something's going to happen in there.
Yeah. This is, I mean, I like the thing that comes to my mind, set aside like, any specific sign based themes, is that this is a very electric and very dynamic moment. When I think about Mercury and Uranus, the first thing I think about is just how active and creative, how inventive the mind is. So I love that. Like, I love Mercury Uranus contacts, generally speaking. I mean, they can cause some mayhem too, but
we like mayhem. We're fine with that.
Right. And then Mars trine Pluto, I think of as very constructive in the sense that you have the will, and you have this kind of underlying primal power that's pushing the will. You have Mars in Mercury's sign being fueled by the Uranus square. The sun trine Neptune gives us a real emotional and imaginative sense of conviction. So I got to feel like this could be a moment of tremendous inspiration with resources and energy to do something with. That's the most constructive thing that comes to my mind. What do you guys
Preach.
think?
Yeah. I think like when we look at the fact that this is the second, this feels so Capricorn energy to me. It's like, oh, I said I would do a thing back at the new moon, right? In January, I set some intentions. And then the beginning of this double period was like June 21, when we had the first Capricorn full moon. It comes around fast and you're like, oh, I didn't accomplish the things I wanted to accomplish, but never fear, Capricorn is here. And so I can do everything that I said I was going to do in 6 months in 1 month. And here we go. We're going to have 1 month to handle it. And let's see how far we get. And so there's some of that's there for me, but there's also just a very real sense there's something happening here that is outside of control of us mortal humans here on Earth. Because of that anaretic degree, it is really the so-called degree of fate. It's a place where decision-making is difficult, or harnessing the energy of things moving around is difficult. And I think it just implies something that we're not necessarily able to affect the outcome of. That is also in this space ruled by a malefic. It's in the Saturn-ruled sign. It's in a Mars-ruled bound. It's in a weird spot. And later this year, Pluto will actually come back to this 1 degree of Capricorn, just to this 30th degree number 29, to make us look in the mirror. Like I said, I'll look directly at the sun, but not in the mirror. And I think there is some ghost here at 29 Capricorn, clearly, that's being pulled up to the surface for us to look at.
Yeah, I mean, if I think about like the ultimate Capricornian, like modern mythos, I think of Lord of the Rings, right? Because Tolkien was a Capricorn and had his sun in the 5th house and everything. And I'm like, like one of the images that comes to mind, I know Alex from Monthly Horoscopes would love this, is like, you've reached Mount Doom. Like, you've got the ring, you're at Mount Doom, and events are conspiring to allow you to have this pivotal moment where maybe there's really a transmuting or releasing of something. That feels like a really cool potential. On the other hand, it does feel like, you know, it feels like things are outside of control. I just jokingly wrote down fated stuff.
Yeah.
when you have this much all coming together, you sort of go, there are multiple timelines and
Yeah, converging right here.
backstories that are converging right here. Yeah.
And I
It's
think
so
these are, oh,
true.
go ahead, Whitney.
I know, I was just going to say there's only so much we can control here, and that's what all of this, Mercury, Uranus, Mars, Pluto energy is bringing to this full moon. Then with the sun in Neptune, we can only control so much, right? But we're having these breakthroughs of insight and our transcendental moment after our, emotional maturation, and like, let it be what it will be.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's well said. I'm looking here at the sun opposite Pluto, which I think technically does not happen until the 23rd. Depends on your time zone, I think.
It's at like 12:37 a.m. I have.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's like
Yeah.
you might as well say it's kind of the evening of the 22nd into the morning of the 23rd, depending on where you're at. But yeah, that sun opposite Pluto moment does it, whenever the sun is opposite Pluto, I can't help but mention that, like, could there be some way in which the storylines of this month, especially considering 2 full moons in Capricorn, bring up some paternal karma?
Yeah.
Like, dad stuff feels like it could be on the astrological menu for the month. What do you guys think?
Yeah, my dad stuff is just leashed to the sun Pluto cycle.
Yeah.
I mean, I can track it like to the day. It's pretty wild. So, because I have a personal planet stellium in Leo, I'm ready. I'm as ready as I'm gonna be.
Yeah.
But I feel also like, thinking of the dad stuff and thinking of the sun and how it functions, it really feels like a king returning home. I've returned home to my kingdom, and immediately it's like 10 people like, we've had a famine, there's been a war, there's fire, everyone's dying. It's like, oh no, there's a little bit of this reckoning feeling again right there. The sun thinking that he's coming back to his palace and getting a little vision of something else instead.
Yeah.
I'm so glad, Alexandra, you mentioned that king coming back to his palace, because one of the images that came to my mind with the sun entering Leo is the king with his crown, right? This is Aslan from the entire Chronicles of Narnia series, right? Like, that, it just feels so deeply like that archetype to me of, we're a ruler with a heavy responsibility, yet we are destined to live this purpose. And maybe I'm a little bit biased because I have Leo on the ascendant. And so for me, while yes, like, Pluto is going to bring some deep stuff, right? Like, it feel like I want to sing for this transit. It feels like a whole new world we're creating here.
Yeah.
That's what our king is bringing, and
Yeah.
revelation and transformation and this like death and rebirth of identity. So I can't wait to see what this one brings.
Yeah. I mean, there's a very like Campbellian, like, hero's
Absolutely. I
journey
thought of that
feeling.
too.
Yeah, and it's so I mean, look at Venus in Leo, 14 degrees out from the sun, just about to appear as the evening star too. And to me, that it goes back to some of the Jupiter Uranus dynamics that there's I can't help but like just think about this whole process having this underlying current about Venus, beauty, desire, the connection between what we enjoy, how we experience peace and pleasure, and how we create a sense of security or stability, and what other what other realities need to be considered alongside of how we create peace or happiness. Those are big, like, kind of really big conversations. And I like if I had to imagine, I'm not a great mundane astrologer, but if I had to imagine a conversation happening in the collective, it might be between, what creates wealth and happiness and what creates sustainability, for example. A
Yeah.
greater sense of peace and prosperity for the planet in relation to the pursuit of personal happiness, wealth, pleasure, or stability. That's not an easy conversation to have collectively, let alone, let alone like personally, let alone collectively. But anyway, long story short, I think it's interesting that really the last thing that happens after this is in the last days of August, after the sun opposes Pluto, Venus appears as the evening star. I'm like, just again, like I can't occasionally, like I just see my chart. I'm like, gee, Venus appears as the morning star on my Venus return too. So I'm like, God, it's like what a and I'm like, that's in my 4th house, which is also the place of father too. So I'm like, oh God, what are we getting into here? But you can see it coming sometimes. You're just like, oh,
I
here we
know,
go.
I know. It's
The
worse if you
dawn
have
of
your
an-
family members' charts, because then you're like,
Oh,
oh no, I see it
I
in
know.
all of our charts.
I
What's
know.
going on?
I know. But back just one second to the sun opposite Pluto.
Yeah.
Anything else you guys want to add to this? Because this is our last transit of the month.
Yeah, for me there with like the sun and Venus and Mercury, it's like Mercury is leading the way and we've got Pluto. It just was very clearly bringing up the story of Orpheus and Eurydice, where Orpheus, travels to the underworld and goes to collect his recently departed bride, and the god and goddess of the underworld, Pluto, says, sure, you can travel back up. Mercury, who is the sort of psychopomp, the deity that walks between those worlds, guides them back up, but Orpheus cannot look back at his bride until they emerge. And Sun Pluto already brings up that Campbellian journey that you talked about, the journey to the innermost cave, and looking at that mouth of the cave and knowing that there's a big, bright, beautiful light world out there that you could return to, and facing that dark moment. So it brought a lot of that up for me. And I just want to emphasize the importance of this one. Sun Pluto is something that happens every year and it goes around like the wheel of the year. But this will be the first time this has happened at this axis of Leo and Aquarius. And so I suspect that it will impact everyone quite differently. And we've been having this on the Cancer Capricorn axis since 2009. So this is going to be a very different feeling. And to your point about the mundane events, I actually went back and I tried to look it up and I was like, oh, what was going on in the world? And I saw this interesting headline. It was like, global recession ends June 2009. And I was like, oh, is that when you think that ended for people? That's so interesting. And it was almost to the day of the first Sun-Pluto opposition in Capricorn and Cancer, which is, having to do with home and having to do with banking and all this stuff. So it was almost like the thing happened, if we can call, a global recession a thing. It happened, and then the work happened for the next, some odd years, almost 2 decades after that. And so I wonder what's going to be happening here. That's that slow building process that I think Pluto talks about. Very, very slow, gradual building and change.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I everyone who watches my channel knows that I am like sort of adamantly apolitical on the channel, right? Like I just don't I don't discuss politics on the channel. I have to mention, and regardless of where anyone in the audience may be coming from, just as a pure fact, that these transits in the middle of the month are also happening as a former president is about to receive, what is the verdict? No, not verdict.
Sentencing?
Sentencing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, again, I don't care what president it is, and I don't care what the backstory is. That is a significant event to be happening around the same time as all of these transits. And that's something that I have no doubt will play alongside of all of these transits this month. So that's just something that, even though I'm someone who, like, my channel is very much about how can we take these transits and apply them to our personal life. And I have mundane astrologers that I follow separately.
Yeah.
But I don't really bring it into my channel. But like occasionally you can't just help but go like, well, look at that, and I think that's going to be one of them this month.
That's so interesting you point that out, Adam. I hadn't made that correlation. And, Something about Sun Pluto really talks about like these revelations about contrasting ideals, right? Light and dark and ego and shadow. And I can really clearly see that represented right in the world and the community, as we move into this month. So awesome.
Yeah.
And Alexandra, super, super insightful about the history. I love that you're pointing these things out. It's amazing. Thank you.
I'm also not a great mundane astrologer, but I am a prolific Googler. And so there is something there for
He's
me.
a
in the future.
Gemini.
I'm so happy. Like one of the things that I was talking with several of the other Nightlight staff who were helping me look at all the auditions. And I just love that you had these really cool ways of bringing in events that had happened in the collective that were so vivid. I think that, we're just so excited to have you here in all of the creative ways that you talk about astrology is just fantastic. And you too, Whitney. Love your swashbuckling example. That was one that, why I gave you guys that in the audition is I was like, you know what? That's a difficult transit to talk about, right? Because it's like, it's
Adam, we know why. It's because it's happening near your ascendant, and so you don't get it because it's happening to you, and you needed us to read your chart for you.
He needed the interpretation.
That's exactly
no astrologer
right.
can read their chart. We know this.
I was looking for a free reading, guys. I was like, that's one of the most difficult transits of the year. I want to hear how they talk about it. You started talking about swashbuckling, Captain, or what's his name? Jack
Sparrow.
You talked about the Texas power grid. I was like, they are awesome. These guys are sweet. So anyway, that is our astrology for the month. Those are the big storylines. We don't cover every last aspect. Yeah. We try to look at the big things, try to create meaningful conversation around them. I feel like this was a really fun first episode. And what we can promise to all of you is that we are going to keep working creatively on these overviews and keep finding new ways of making them fun and interesting. And, I think it's like a band. When you first get together, you're like we're figuring out how to play together. So give us a few months as we figure out our jam habits and good patterns and stuff like that. But I want to, before we go, I want to point you to both Whitney and Alexandra's work. Whitney, astroarcana.com. You can book a reading with her. You can, yeah, there you go. You can book a reading with her. You can follow her on Instagram for astrological content, astro.arcana.astrology. So I highly recommend getting a reading with both of our hosts. They are fantastic astrologers. They have come through the Nightlight programs or are in them at the moment, and also have other training and a long history of studying and being in love with astrology, except for Alexandra, who always hated it. And only recently, no, I'm just kidding. And Alexandra, you can find her at 9livesastrology.com. And also you can book a reading with her there and see the other offerings that she has. And 9 Lives Astrology on Instagram. Actually, let me just do this really quickly. Let's see. Here's Astro Arcana. So this is Whitney's website where you can book a reading. You see her services and contact form. And then Alexandra's, I will switch. And here is...
That's my annoying pop-up. You got to click the X.
Oh, whoops, sorry.
Oh, it's beautiful, though.
I have one of those, too. I think it looks pretty nice. But anyway, you can book readings with them here. These are their websites, so you recognize them when you land on them. You guys, thank you. This was really fun. Thank you guys for being here and just contributing so much energy and life. I haven't had this much fun doing a monthly overview forever. It's been a long time since I think Alex at one point was helping me for a little bit, then he couldn't. And I was like, I need this kind of conversation. This was great.
I'm happy to be bringing our light into your innermost cave.
That's right.
Hey, that was a Sun Pluto reference.
Yeah.
That's right. Yep.
Yes, this was so incredible, and I'm so happy to be a part of this and can't wait to see how it evolves.
Yeah, for sure. Well, there's lots of astrology in August to be talking about. We've got a Jupiter-Saturn square in August that is epic, especially following off from the recent great conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn in Aquarius. So there's a lot more to talk about. And then before you know it, we're back into eclipse season this fall. So yeah, we're off to the races. But we started in like one of the most interesting months of the year too. So,
And this is supposed to be the slow year.
I know, right? Yeah.
Okay.
Oh my God.
That
All right.
means
Well,
we'll all have thriving careers, right? Like just a lot to talk about.
that's right. Wait till we start breaking down stuff like Saturn and Neptune and Aries next year. That's wild. So, yeah.
Buckle up.
Yeah, thank you guys for listening. Remember that you can find all of my work and classes and all that good stuff at nightlightastrology.com. If you have any questions about anything you find on the website, email info@nightlightastrology.com. Thank you again to Alexandra and Whitney for being here, and we will see you all again next month. Bye, everyone.